Yeon-woo's reaction was strange. The teenager dropped his head and laughed. After a short pause, he said that it was all nonsense. And then he looked the chief in the eye and asked him if he really hoped that the teenager would believe him. Yeon-woo suddenly became very serious and asked if they really had something that the government could not create. The chief calmly replied that it was up to Yeon-woo to decide whether to believe or not, and he would not know until he saw it. Suddenly, the door opened sharply and someone came inside. The boss said that Yeon-woo would not leave here just like that. The guy was referring to the guards who entered the room with machine guns. He said that Yeon-woo had made a fuss, so he couldn't just leave. After that, he turned to the teenager, looked him in the eye, and said that if Yeon-woo helped him and did not touch them, he would be released. And then he asked if the teenager wanted to end his life like that. Yeon-woo realized that he did not feel any cells near him that he could use, and the guards had a flamethrower, and the teenager was not sure he could fight them. Suddenly, someone shouted and interrupted their conversation. It was Han Song-yu, and he waved happily, saying that they were classmates and he wanted to go together. The guy was behaving very strangely and not very appropriately, so Yeon-woo did not know how to behave. Han Seong-yu's face showed a smile and childlike carelessness. After a while, the teenagers went down the stairs to the VIP room. Han Seong-yu said that the guards were in charge and they would keep an eye on them. He told Yeon-woo that this time he really saved him, and his friend had to know. Han Seong-yu asked him what his immunity meant and why he hadn't told him about it earlier. Yeon-woo remained silent, so his friend spoke up and said that in any case, he had done well, and this time Han Seong-yu had to impress his brothers. He went on to say that only true substance addicts were allowed into the basement. After that, Han Seong-yu had a smile on his face and offered to just go down and find the thing. Yeon-woo was silent, so his classmate asked him what he thought of the idea and whether he understood what his friend meant. Han Seong-yu began to suck up, saying that their Yeon-woo was the most loyal classmate. Suddenly, Yeon-woo began to behave strangely. He told his friend not to be ashamed and called him a guy who could only wag his tongue. He suggested asking Han Song-yu about this and how he would answer him. Yeon-woo asked what was the point of chasing such a bad thing. He continued and asked how he felt about eating with such creatures. Yeon-woo said that in his eyes, scum like Han Seong-yu was more like shit. His classmate interrupted the teenager, asking why he was talking about his food and where the audacity in Yeon-woo came from. But he interrupted Han Seong-yu, asking if he was supposed to understand all this. Yeon-woo began to say that he had nothing against it if it was Han Seong-yu's own instinct for survival. Suddenly, the teenager said that his classmate was going to die soon anyway. This caused him to freeze. Yeon-woo looked at his frightened face and repeated that it would happen very soon. Han Song-yu just stood there with his mouth open and did not understand anything. Lee Young-woo walked forward as if nothing had happened and asked if it was the same VIP room. Han Seong-yu was silent. He couldn't understand what the hell had happened all of a sudden. Yeon-woo didn't pay attention and just went downstairs to enter the room. Suddenly, I heard the sound of a door opening. Yeon-woo did not show any signs of fear. After a short pause, he turned to Han Seong-yu and said that he hoped his classmate would stay here because it could have been dangerous. This hurt Han Seong-yu and he suddenly exploded. The teenager ran to the door and shouted at him not to make him a weakling. Meanwhile, monsters were being filmed upstairs. Park Jun filmed them and mocked them for being infected drug addicts. He said that when the medicine was strong, the cells fell off on their own, so he needed to add a little more. Then a girl approached them and called out to the teenagers. She shouted at them and asked how long they were going to do this and suggested that they leave quickly before the infected person was with them. Another man with long hair was watching them. The gang discussed Yeon-woo's disappearance. The girl left the room. She corresponded with someone and was told that they still could not get out. Someone stayed in Cannes. Suddenly, someone called out to her and asked where she had gone. It was a man with long hair. He asked why the girl left and didn't talk to her brothers. She responded aggressively to get him to leave her alone. The man said that he had prepared a gift for her and asked her to wait a bit. But the girl turned around, saying that she was not interested and that she was going to the bathroom. A cheeky smile appeared on the man's face. After that, he blocked her way to the door with his hand. The man asked her if she was really going to take a bath. And then he offered to go together, saying that his brother would help her. Meanwhile, the teenagers went down to the basement to the VIP room. Lee Young-woo asked if they were heading in that direction, because there was nothing there. Han Sung-yu said that the VIP room was further away. He added that Yeon-woo should wait a bit, because it was a closed area. Suddenly, the teenager felt something that alerted him. Han Seong-yu was the first to go, and he said that there was only one road here, but he couldn't remember where. Suddenly, the teenagers heard the sounds of monsters growling. Then, as if from nowhere, monsters came running from around the corner. Han Sung-yu was scared and fell to the floor screaming. But Lee Young-woo did not even move and simply stopped the monster with his hand. Then, with a calm voice, he asked Han Sung-yu if he was okay. My classmate watched with open eyes and could not come to his senses and understand what had happened. Yeon-woo held the monster directly by the mouth, and the monster roared but did not touch the teenager. The boy looked directly at the monster. He was not afraid and did not show any signs of it, but mentally ordered the monster to get lost. The monster meekly obeyed and simply turned around and left. The other monsters did the same. Yeon-woo asked if Han Sung-yu knew why they had left, but my classmate couldn't say a word. He had never seen anything like this before. He looked at Jeonwoo's hand, which was dripping with virus cells as if it were water. Jeonwoo said it was his order, but these monsters were made of flesh. Han Sung-yu did not understand what was happening at all and was in a state of shock. Monsters were hiding around corners. There were a lot of them inside, but they did not attack. The teenagers ran quickly, and Han Sung-yu turned to Yeon-woo and suggested that they just go back. But the teenager told him to shut up and run away, otherwise the monsters would eat him. Yeon-woo was not afraid at all and had time to think about whether this had really happened and whether it was because of the medication. He thought that if they really existed, he could save his mother. Meanwhile, the teenagers found that VIP room. They went inside, and Han Sung-yu closed the door behind him. Jeonwoo looked at everything carefully and stepped forward cautiously. Meanwhile, monsters were creeping up outside the door. Han Sung-yu was closer to them, so he got scared and screamed. The classmate turned to Lee Young-woo and called the teenager. But the guy was silent, so Han Sung-yu asked him what happened. The bodies of other ordinary people and empty bottles of alcohol were lying on the floor. Suddenly, these people stood up, and it turned out that they were monsters. The monsters were in the process of transformation and began to growl like real infected people. Han Sung-yu asked if they were still alive. It turned out that the teenagers were being watched on CCTV cameras. It was the boss. He was looking after Yeonwoo and asked the guard how many mergers had taken place along the way. The guy was very interested in the teenagers' immunity, and the chief assured him that it was indeed possible. He watched Yeon-woo go through the monsters with complete calmness and courage. Han Sung-yu was not so brave and told Yeon-woo to quickly pack up all his things and get out of this madness. Suddenly, someone coughed in front of the teenager and Jeon-woo froze. It was a guy who turned into a monster and fell to the floor. Han Sung-yu got scared and ran back, hiding behind his friend. Suddenly, the poor man began to vomit. These symptoms were already familiar to Yeon-woo. This was the main symptom in infected people. Yeon-woo was very curious and watched what was happening closely. The vomit was the same as that of other infected people. The teenager did not understand anything now, because these monsters did not look like the ones he saw in the room above. The vomit also contained virus cells. Meanwhile, behind on the other side of the door, monsters were approaching. It seemed that they wanted to get inside. Han Sung-yu was the first to pay attention to them, and at that moment, the monsters simply burst into the room through the glass, breaking it. Han Sung-yu began to panic and run away, while Yeon-woo remained calm as usual. The monsters ran straight for the teenagers. Han Sung-yu told Yeon-woo to run away faster, but the teenager stood there thinking about something. He was deciding whether to use control, because he didn't want to feel pain later. Suddenly, the monsters stalled and just stood there. Yeon-woo noticed that something was wrong. They didn't respond to his orders like the other monsters. They seemed to hesitate, but Yeon-woo could not understand why. Suddenly, the teenager turned back, seemingly realizing what was going on. Behind him was the guy who was turning into a monster. Suddenly, Yeon-woo remembered the boss telling him that they were able to overcome the cells. The teenager realized what kind of medicine it was. Meanwhile, the events moved back in time to when teenagers were just getting on the school bus to go on a field trip. Lee Hong-mi and her friends were taking pictures near the transport. Everyone was so happy at that moment. On the bus, Han-mi suggested that the boys take a photo of their third-grade class. Kang Ji-hoon was sitting behind me looking at the girl. Lee Hong-mi said she needed it for her blog. The teenager took a picture and joked that now she had to give him a percentage of her video. Han-mi turned on the camera and started broadcasting live, telling us where they were going. She told her classmates to look at the camera and wave to the audience. Kang Ji-hoon stared at Lee Hong-mi. He just couldn't take his eyes off her. The events moved into reality. The teenager began to hear some conversations, but still thought about Han-mi. He had other classmates with him, and they were having an emotional argument about something as usual. Suddenly, someone shouted Lee Hong-mi's name again, and Seon-young heard it and turned back. She saw Kang Ji-hoon, who appeared to have regained consciousness and was holding his head with his hand. Suddenly, the teenager realized that his previously infected hand was completely clean. Kang Ji-hoon could not understand how it had happened. He thought he was dreaming. Suddenly, Seung-yeon shouted to her classmates to shut up because Kang Ji-hoon had woken up. They pounced on the teenager with questions about his well-being, but he could not understand what was happening. Isuri was holding a homemade flamethrower and said that she had prepared it in case something was wrong and asked Kang Ji-hoon to tell her. But the teenager still could not understand anything and attacked his classmates with questions about where they were and what had happened. It seemed that the teenagers were sitting in a bus or something. Kang Ji-hoon asked Park Min about the medicine. He couldn't believe that it prevented cell infection. Park Min bragged about saving Kang Ji-hoon and asked if the teenager realized how valuable the gift was. But Kang Ji-hoon's reaction was a bit strange. He didn't seem happy about it at all. The teenager bowed his head and could not even put two words together. Park Min called Kang Ji-hoon a bastard for not even thanking him. Then Soyon came up to him. She said in a calm voice that she did not understand why he thought he saw Hanmi, but she was not there. Kang Ji-hoon only asked if Park Seo-young had saved him, but the girl turned around and looked at Park Choa, saying that she did not save him. Seo-young said that it was Park Cho who ran to him and managed to get Kang Ji-hoon out of there. If it wasn't for her, who knows what would have happened. The teenager could not believe what he was hearing. Meanwhile, Yeon-woo's father entered the vehicle. He saw Kang Ji-hoon and was glad that the teenager had finally woken up. His father bombarded him with questions about his health. He passed by Park Choa. It seemed that the girl was completely absorbed in her thoughts. Park Choa recalled saving Kang Ji-hoon from the fire. She saw him lying on the floor next to the monster, looking bad. The girl ran to her classmate as fast as she could. She was very worried about her friend. When she came running, she fell on the floor next to me and assured me that she would save Kang Ji-hoon. But the teenager named her Hanmi. Kang Ji-hoon kept repeating her name like a madman. Park Cho has come to life. She looked back in Kang Ji-hoon's direction. The girl thought that he had gone too far and did not understand what it was all about. Yeon-woo's father stood in the center of the transport and asked if they were ready to go. The man promised to take them to a safe place. My father said they wanted to find Yeonwoo, and then he said that even though they were already adults, they should call their parents first so that they wouldn't worry. The man was saying that even if it was difficult, it was still better to find time, because their parents were very worried about them. Yeon-woo's father looked at Kang Ji-hoon, who was sitting with his head down. He asked if he was going to call them. The man started to argue that his parents were worried, but Kang Ji-hoon interrupted, asking what it meant. Yeon-woo's father said it was not important and changed the subject, saying that he wanted to talk to Kang Ji-hoon alone. The teenager did not pretend to be interested, but he was. Meanwhile, the events moved to the VIP room where Yeon-woo was. The chief stood by the table. Suddenly, Yeon-woo wanted to enter the room, but the guards wouldn't let him in. The chief ordered the men to let the teenager in. After that, he came back and said that he was waiting for him and asked if he had brought what he was supposed to. Yeon-woo started yelling at him, asking what he was doing. The chief reiterated that he had already said that there was a remedy that could overcome the infection of cells. But Yeon-woo told him that when the medicine was strong, the cells stopped infecting. The man continued that he did not know why. Perhaps it was an instinct for survival. And then he changed the subject, saying that their reality had turned into hell, and then asked if he had brought substances. Yeon-woo attacked the man for infecting people and turning them into monsters. The chief said that he had injected the infected man with medicine. He saved them, but there were some difficulties. The chief continued that suddenly monsters began to appear. And then he added that meeting someone like Yeonwoo was a great opportunity, and that's why the man offered to cooperate. He looked Yeon-woo in the eye and told him that everything now depended on his answer. Meanwhile, the teenagers on the bus were deciding how to move on and what to do. And Kang Ji-hoon and Yeon-woo's father were discussing something in private. The man said that most of the teenagers were infected and died a year later. The point was that Kang Ji-hoon was saved by his friends, so the teenager was indebted to them, and especially Park Min, because it was he who gave him the drug and saved him. Somehow it happened that the cells did not infect Kang Ji-hoon. The teenager looked at his father, Yeonwoo, but remained silent and did not rush to answer. Then the man said that in any case, Kang Ji-hoon was having a hard time now. The teenager interrupted him, saying that he had already realized that he was infected, but somehow managed to survive and asked if the man meant it. But Yeon-woo's father asked him what kind of negative he meant, and explained that he didn't mean it at all. He explained that he was just trying to warn him that he shouldn't give up so soon. Yeon-woo's father continued that he had to find his son, but he was near the Han River. The man missed him very much, and you could hear it in his voice. The father was very sorry that his son was left alone. Suddenly, the man's tone changed, as if he was getting to the point. He looked into Kang Ji-hoon's eyes and said that if the teenager threatened his son with a flamethrower again, he would never forgive him. Meanwhile, the teenagers were hostile to Park Min and looked at him askance. The guy tried to apologize, saying that he didn't realize what he was doing and was sorry for it. Park seemed to be sincerely repentant, promising that he would not harm them again. Isuri pretended to believe her, and then asked where the teenager had gotten the medicine, asking if there was really a remedy for infection. Park Min began to fumble, saying that he wasn't sure, but in any case, they could check it out. Then, the teenager looked at Kang Ji-hoon and Father Yeon-woo and asked out loud why they were talking for so long. Suddenly, Park Min interrupted their conversation by calling out to her husband. He asked if there was anything he could do to help them. Isuri watched Park Min's behavior closely, and she could see right through him and definitely did not trust him. Meanwhile, the guys continued to talk about Yeonwoo and what was threatening him. The father said he had to bring him home, his son. But he didn't want to cross the line, and after saying that, the man looked at Kang Ji-hoon again. Meanwhile, Seong-young was on the phone with someone and shouted that her father was supposed to come and get her. Park Seo-young was sitting alone, looking at something on her phone. More precisely, she was corresponding. However, it seemed that no one answered her. The girl was looking at her phone screen and thinking about something. The messages referred to a protective suit, and the girl wrote to someone and asked them to find it and put it on. Suddenly, someone interrupted her thoughts and scared Soyon a little. It was Isuri, and she asked if he had deliberately stood in such a noisy city. Soyon replied that she thought Yeon-woo was somewhere in the center. Then Isuri asked how she knew the effect of the drug. She went on to say that she had never heard of him, and that Park Min must have been testing the medicine for a reason. Soyon said she did not know all the details. Park Min just knew it, that's all. And then she added that she had some medicine, and if Park Min was persuaded, she thought it could help Yeon-woo. She tried to go on to say that this was why they were together, but their conversation was interrupted by Kang Min. He said that this was his way of helping Yeon-woo, but he needed hot water. Then Isuri just exploded and ordered Kang Min to shut up and stop talking nonsense. Suddenly, a breathless Choi ran inside and ordered everyone to leave immediately, because there was a dispensary nearby with the materials they needed. He told everyone to hurry up because it seemed that no one was there yet. The company dutifully obeyed and began to prepare to leave. Isuri walked alongside Kang Min and started a conversation about hot water and Lee Yeon-woo. She said that even if they found the teenager, Park Min had a stronger remedy. Isuri said with a serious voice that the guy definitely knew something and knew where to get the information he needed. But she was still confused about why Park Seo-young wanted to help Yeon-woo so badly. And at the same time, she was holding on to Park Min. Perhaps they decided to act together. Isuri asked Kang Min why So-young was wearing a cap. It seemed that the girl had heard what was being said about her, so she lingered a bit on the way out. Isuri said at this point that she did not trust Park Min. After all, he could have killed any of them for his own benefit. Soyon overheard the conversation in time, because this information could be useful to her. The company withdrew from transportation. Choi led the company, saying he was checking out the area, but ordered them to keep a close eye and be careful. Suddenly, Yeon-woo's father shouted as if he had found something. There was a station in front of them. At that moment, someone called out to the man, and he turned toward the sound. It was Kang Ji-hoon. He said that he understood that the line was not to be crossed, but what if he did? Yeon-woo's father looked at the teenager and listened carefully to what he was saying. The guy said that he was not as important as Lee Yeon-woo right now. Meanwhile, Seong-yeon couldn't believe that they would be returning home soon. She told Park Joa that she was sure that she would never go anywhere else. Then Park Choa asked what to do with Lee Yeon-woo. Seong-yeon exploded and screamed, asking why he was here. She was indignant, saying that they could not have found the teenager in the heart of Seoul. Park Min walked alone and thought about how they were all going to find Yeon-woo, but he knew for sure that they would be looking for him, so he had to keep a low profile. Soyon paused a bit and looked away. Then she interrupted her friends and started talking. The girl said that the whole situation was quite strange. She went on to say that everyone was absolutely talking about Lee Yeon-woo. Park Min also turned and started listening when they started talking about Yeon-woo. Soyon went on to say that things were different during school hours. None of them were close to Lee Yeon-woo. After that, the girl asked if they were his friends now. Isuri asked So-young in response what she thought, because she was not close to him either. Isuri went on to say that no one was in touch with Lee Yeon-woo at the moment, but they were looking for him. And then the girl asked if Soyon was that close to him. After that, Isuri simply moved on, saying that there was no point in wasting time and ordered everyone to leave. Soyon did not leave. She seemed to be thinking about what to say. It seemed that she had a lot of emotions inside her. Then the girl said that it was exactly like that. Then she turned toward Isuri and paused. And then she said that at least she wasn't. The girls looked into each other's eyes, and Soyon said that she did not use her friends. Suddenly, a helicopter sounded in the sky. Everyone looked sharply up at the sky because it was not expected. Someone shouted that it had happened again. It was military equipment. Kang Ming asked if they were already all over the place, and Isura received a message. She pulled out her cell phone to see what she had received. Kang Min noticed this and turned to his girlfriend. He approached Isura and looked at her phone and asked if it was the man by the Kan River. And then he asked when the girl managed to subscribe to it. Suddenly, Kang Min abruptly snatched the phone from the girl's hands. Everyone looked in their direction because the teenagers had made a bit of a fuss. Isuri shouted for Park Min to look faster. A few seconds later, he asked about the Han River monster. And then, after a short laugh, he asked if he was still alive. Jeonwoo's father also listened attentively. Park Min's face changed dramatically. He said that the man could kill a monster and had red hair. Meanwhile, the blogger was broadcasting live near the Kan River. The guy piqued the interest of the audience by telling them that he was going to do something that threatened his life. Suddenly, a huge giant monster climbed out from the top of the bridge and roared loudly. At that moment, that guy appeared. The blogger was filming him. It seemed like it was a staged event. It turned out that it was Lee Tian, and he had that smile on his face as always. Park Min looked at the video on his phone screen and couldn't believe what he was seeing. He simply had no face, only shock and fear. The teenagers discussed this strange and unexpected collaboration. But their argument was interrupted by Park Min's words, saying that he was obliged to find Yeonwoo. The teenager was walking from side to side and muttering to himself that he was supposed to find Yeonva and that it was definitely him in the video. Suddenly, he was interrupted. Someone told Park Min that he must have known something. It was Park Seo-young. She added that he must have known something about Yeonwoo as well. Soyon went on to say that if that guy was alive, then Jeonwoo must have been too. Meanwhile, the events shifted back to the room with the monsters and the addicts. There were also some poor people inside who were turning into monsters. At that moment, Lee Yeon-woo came inside. He stopped at the entrance and looked at these worthless addicts and what had happened to them. One of them growled and was shaking as if he was trying to say something. It was disgusting to be around them, but he endured it for the sake of information about these cells. The teenager looked closely at these monsters and watched to see if the infection had passed. He recalled the words of the chief who said that when the medicine was strong, the cells stopped fusing. Yeonwoo was angry at the time that he had been deceived. He could not understand what the chief said about whether it worked on addicts or whether they became infected and turned into monsters. But the answer was simple. They turned into monsters who were addicted to psychotropic substances. Behind the teenager was another monster, more familiar to him and seemingly aggressive. He recalled the words of the boss, who asked what choice Lee Yeon-woo would have made. Instead of becoming a monster and addicted to various substances, he was thinking about which choice was right. But Yeon-woo knew for sure that he had no other options in reality. He recalled how he fought for his mother. Yeon-woo fought for her with all his might. He was in so much pain at the time. He was thinking about what would happen if his loved one got infected. Yeon-woo didn't know if he was wrong now. The teenager stood in front of the chief and asked him what he could do. There was a pause between them. The boys looked into each other's eyes, and tension was palpable. Yeon-woo asked again what he could do to help. There were bowling pins on the floor. Suddenly they broke. Someone scored a strike because all the pins were knocked down. That was the main man. He was just bowling while talking to Yeon-woo. After that, he offered the teenager to play as well. The head continued that sometimes it is useful to relax and relieve stress, and bowling was a great way to do it. The man said how much he liked living here, and then asked if Jeonwoo liked it that way. But the teenager wanted to finish the job, so he changed the subject, saying that he was not interested in bowling and asked what he was supposed to do. The chief only said that he was very sorry, and then he began to tell me that they used to work here as a local black market. After that, I took another bowling ball and paused. The main man threw the ball and knocked down most of the pins again. and then happily asked how Yeon-woo could not like it here. The teenager asked if anyone was willing to buy the medicine, but the boss seemed a little annoyed by this question, and then he replied as if he was doing a favor, that even in hell, miracle cures would be in demand. Yeon-woo said that he did not observe any buyers here, but the boss said it wasn't just about people, he needed another item. Yeon-woo asked that they wanted to send him to some basement for something else again. The chief said that the teenager had guessed right, because there were some other places, and he asked if Yeon-woo could help him. The teenager stood in a stupor, because he was joking about the basement. Then the chief snapped his fingers and called the guards, ordering them to escort Yeonwoo away. He promised the teenager that if he helped him, he would repay him and would not spare Yeonwoo. The teenager said it sounded encouraging. The chief explained that the only way to survive in this hell is to play a game with the devil himself. The guards discussed Yeon-woo's clothing size, and they had to find the right clothes for him. The main one asked the other guard where Min was now. The man asked if Min-sik was with the girl who had also come here. The boss didn't seem to like it and asked what it meant. Meanwhile, the blogger and Lee Tae-in were standing on the bridge. The guy was filming something on his phone and asked the man with red hair if he had seen it too. There were a lot of monsters in the water, and the blogger said that he took revenge for them all. Lee Tae-in asked that the blogger had promised to kill him if he helped him. The guy spoke very loudly, saying that the man was cool and he would definitely help him in the future. The blogger was talking about something, but then he turned around and saw monsters on the ground and screamed that they looked like chimeras. A smile appeared on Lee Tae-in's face. He offered to meet the blogger again, and then he would make him his chimera. Meanwhile, Yeon-woo was coming down the stairs, wearing a new jacket. Suddenly, he noticed something and looked up. That girl was sitting on the stairs with her head down. It seemed that she felt someone approaching, but did not pay attention. Yeon-woo asked why the entrance was blocked. Suddenly, the girl started accusing him. She said she came here because of him. The girl continued that she would never have come to this place before. She called Yeonwoo a scumbag and asked if he liked to play with people. But the teenager didn't understand anything, saying that he didn't know what had happened. But wouldn't it be better for her to go to her friends to vent her anger? The girl screamed that they were not friends but scum. Her face was beaten and bloody. And then she asked why Yeon-woo took pity on them then, and that it was all pointless. The teenager asked the girl if she had been held by force, and said that she just had to run away. Then, Yeon-woo said he didn't know anything that was going on, and then asked if her friends had ever dumped her, but he didn't wait for an answer, saying that he was being dumped. And then she called Yeonwoo when she realized he was leaving. She asked the teenager to stay with her for a while. The girl was very uncertain and made long pauses. After that, she exploded and screamed at herself for saying that, and then she yelled at Yeonwoo, calling him a bastard and ordering him to leave. He just turned around and left. Yeon-woo did not even turn to her. He seemed to be completely indifferent to this strange girl. She also did not return to him because she told him to leave. Suddenly, Yeon-woo agreed and the girl returned to him. The teenager agreed that he did not understand people's personalities well because he was abandoned by his friends. And then, after a short pause, he looked at the girl from the corner of his eye. After that, he went on to offer to go together if she wanted to. The events moved to the corridor, where the floor was covered with virus cells. It looked like an abandoned building after the apocalypse, where no one had set foot for a long time. Suddenly, someone came inside and his shadow fell to the floor. The guy came in and stood on both feet, looking around the room in a stupor. There were a lot of medicines scattered on the floor. Yeon-woo went downstairs and picked up the substance, saying that it was not as scary as he had expected. Suddenly, someone began to growl and the teenager looked up. A monster was lying next to him, a young man who ended his life in such a shameful way. Suddenly, this poor man opened his eyes and looked directly at Yeonwoo. Their eyes crossed and the monster asked for medicine. Meanwhile, the events moved to a residential neighborhood. A man directed fire and wished someone to die. He wanted to burn the monster alive. They were two healthy men, and after hard work, they finally finished their job. His partner told him to save gas because it was low, but his friend said that he decided to warm up a bit. But his partner exploded, asking why he had to make such a fuss over one monster. He looked back and asked who that girl was. His friend asked if it was Min-sik's friend. The girl exploded, saying that she was not his girlfriend. The man scratched his chin and chuckled, and then he came closer to the girl and asked if he understood correctly that she did not have a boyfriend. The girl was wary, but the men came closer to her and began to hold out their hands, telling her not to break. Suddenly, their conversation was interrupted. Someone called out to the men. She looked up and swallowed loudly. It was clear that she was very scared. It was Yeonwoo who handed the bag of substances to these ignorant people. The man called his boss and said that they had gotten what they needed. They were negotiating, and it seemed that the chief was giving them further orders. Yeonwoo interrupted the conversation and asked if the man sitting there was an employee of theirs. The teenager went on to say that the man was dying of infection there, and he became curious. But he was answered by a man who was on the phone with his boss and told Yeonwoo not to pay attention, because he would soon turn into one of the masses of useless flesh, and then handed over the package and ordered him to check it. He wanted Yeonwoo to assure him that there were no cells there. Meanwhile, there was a message on the phone, and they sent a photo and marked the place where the package should be left. Yeonwoo held the phone, but he didn't really understand what he was supposed to do or put down. Suddenly, the girl called out to him. She said that it was a place where all the goods were stored. Then she turned to Yeonwoo, looked him in the eye, and asked if he was looking for him. The teenager asked her what she meant. The girl said she understood because the phone was used to buy illegal substances. And then she added that they said to follow them and asked what Yeonwoo thought about it. After all the criminals were doing it. Her point was that they had been very nice so far, but that things could change. So she asked if Yeonwoo was afraid of gangsters. But the teenager looked the girl in the eyes and said that he didn't care about them. After that, Yeonwoo went ahead and said that he just wanted to learn more about cells, and especially about drugs. He added that the girl would not understand him, even if she really wanted to. Yeonwoo paused for a moment, but the girl was not going to answer. Then he said he had to protect his family. The man turned to him and told him to speed up. Suddenly, the girl grabbed his hand and said that she wanted Yeonwoo to follow her. The teenager did not understand what was happening. The girl continued that first of all, she was here because of him. She looked Yeonwoo in the eye and asked him to protect her. The girl continued that her friends had chosen the wrong path, and she asked him to protect her, promising to do whatever he wanted. But Yeonwoo was angry because she didn't like such thoughts and pulled out her hand. After that, he called the girl crazy, asking if she had a conscience to ask for such things. Meanwhile, the events moved to another colored room. It was the closest point. There was a company standing there, and Yeonwoo asked if it was here because the room looked strange. The men asked if the teenager was afraid and offered to go with him, but Yeonwoo went ahead saying he could handle it on his own. At that moment, the girl started screaming and asking to go with him. She was afraid that these men would start harassing her again, but Yeonwoo didn't even slow down, and the girl screamed again for him to wait for her. The teenager asked why she suddenly decided to follow him. Yeonwoo clarified whether the girl wanted to get protection from him or was just afraid to stay with those guys. The teenager looked intently into the room through the glass, and then he said that those men were terrible and he knew it himself. After that, he went ahead and asked the girl to wait there, but she yelled at him that he had come up with something strange. Then she added that it was impossible to get into the room without a key. She took something out by the window and said that Yeonwoo's actions were too absurd. The teenagers entered the building and climbed the stairs. The girl asked what Yeonwoo would do without her, and then she called him an idiot. The guy asked what that meant. Then the girl said that Yeonwoo should have taken care of her because she helped him, but the teenager just laughed at that. Then she looked at his back and said that he was very nasty. After that, she yelled that Yeonwoo was really annoying her, and then said that she was only interested in him now, so he could pay attention to it. But at that moment, the teenager was thinking about Soyon and whether she was okay. And then I thought about why she had followed him, since Yeonwoo was so dangerous. But Soyon saved him once. He remembered their last conversation, when Yeonwoo had said terrible things to her. Soyon said she thought they were still friends. She was so good at choosing her words so that it didn't sound romantic. Yeonwoo wondered if her words were sincere because he had never been close to a girl before. Then his new girlfriend yelled at him and asked if he was even listening to her. The girl was very intrusive and tried to ask how old Yeonwoo was, saying that she was older. The teenager asked her to stop. Then the girl tried to call him names, but suddenly everyone stopped. After all, they were facing a monster. Yeonwoo looked at him, examined him closely, and tried to establish contact. The teenager said that it looked like the monster wanted to attack, and then added that he was like a lump of meat. After that, I just walked forward thinking that these monsters had more legs than the connected monsters. And then I thought that they were very boring, and if you looked closely, you could see the difference. The girl was screaming and scared, asking where Yeonwoo had gone. He told her to run after him and keep up. The teenagers turned the corner, but Yeonwoo stayed to take a closer look at the monster. And then he asked the girl if the cells were addicted to illegal substances, because the monster was not interested in people. Thoughts jumped back into his head that the monster was fleshy and that it was most likely due to the side effects of illegal substances. Then the teenagers would approach a room with the door open. The girl said it was the right place. The room was a mess, but it looked clean. There was a monster on the bed. The poor man looked bad and miserable. Yeon-woo said that this monster had taken a banned substance to get rid of the feeling of fear. He said that it was a person first and foremost. The girl was looking at the monster. Her eyes were full of fear. Suddenly, the monster got out of bed and roared, and the girl screamed in fear. Yeon-woo covered her with his hand and focused all his attention on the monster. Suddenly, the monster began to speak. This eerie voice that resembled a human voice, but at the same time demonic. The monster looked Yeon-woo in the eye and asked him to give it to him. It repeated this over and over again. He began to slide out of his bed and begged me to do so because he was in great pain. The monster was already on the floor and kept begging for medicine. Yeon-woo apologized, saying that he could not help him. He explained that the drug stopped the fusion of cells, but because of a side effect, it remained a piece of flesh. But the teenager could not stop it. The monster kept trying to talk to them. It was hard for him, but he said he didn't want anything. Then he said that he would rather be killed. After all this unbearable pain he was experiencing, it was impossible to stop it. Then the monster began to beg them to finish him off. The teenagers stood in a stupor. Meanwhile, men stood outside waiting for Yeonwoo. Suddenly, teenagers appeared in their field of vision. They immediately asked if Yeon-woo had brought what he was supposed to. A smile appeared on their faces. After that, the man asked if something had happened to the teenager because he was very upset. Yeon-woo said that everything was fine, but they kept up and asked what the teenagers were doing because they had been there for so long. The guy was silent. He didn't have to answer them anymore, and he wasn't afraid of these bastards. Yeon-woo looked at the city, which was completely deserted. Only the sounds of military vehicles could be heard. Then the man said they had to go back because the soldiers had already started moving. He explained that the military was currently solving the problem with the Han River. Suddenly, Yeon-woo stopped and asked if they were talking about the Han River. The teenagers were shocked by this request from the monster. He kept repeating that they should finish him off, begging for it. Yeon-woo seemed to feel a lot of empathy for him and understood the pain the monster was talking about. But the girl did not understand this and just felt threatened. Yeon-woo was mesmerized and could not take his eyes off the monster. The poor man fell to the floor and crawled to the teenagers, asking for help all the time. The girl could not stand it and asked to run away. She was constantly screaming. But Yeon-woo was in no hurry to run away. He really wanted to help the monster and alleviate its suffering. He couldn't decide whether he could relieve his pain by using force, or if it would only make it worse. Perhaps it would have been better to burn it with fire, but still, Yeon-woo decided to do it himself, but he didn't know how. The thought flashed through the teenager's mind again, wondering how he had come to this point and found himself in this situation. The girl held her leg and apologized while screaming in fear. And then she noticed Yeonwoo, who was not going to run away, and it made her stunned. She screamed at the guy and asked him what he was doing and why he was looking at this monster. The events moved to a residential complex. The men went first and the teenagers followed. They discussed that they had gotten a good catch. Yeon-woo walked very sadly with his head down, but his thoughts were interrupted by that girl. He came back and asked what happened. She looked down at the teenager and asked why Yeon-woo was standing there looking at the monster. The girl started to speculate that the teenager wanted to get infected himself or was having fun in this way. Then Yeon-woo interrupted her and asked if she really thought he looked like her friends. At first, the girl was outraged and screamed, and then asked if it was because of the medication. Yeon-woo did not answer, so she talked to herself, thinking that it was impossible. She went on to say that no one had a cure for the infection. It simply did not exist. The girl said that Yeon-woo should just give up, but the teenager ignored her and just kept going. She was outraged by this behavior and started shouting again. But Yeon-woo did not listen to her even then. She just stayed alone, begging him to wait. The stairs were empty, and the teenager just walked forward as if they were not together. The girl stood in a stupor, unable to believe that she had been treated like this again. The bastard just left. She put her hands on her head and did not know what to do next. It seemed that the girl was desperate and could not just leave. Suddenly, she heard screams, someone asking to be released. She looked up the stairs and saw someone being beaten badly. When she got a closer look, her blood ran cold. She recognized Min-sik, who had also hurt her. The guy asked his victim where her friends were and then ordered her to stop fidgeting and listen to him. He licked his lips and then praised the victim with satisfaction. It turned out that those were the girl's memories, and she was the victim. She fell to the floor and screamed that she could not forget what had happened and was annoyed by it. Then she thought about what might happen if she just left. From the very beginning, she just wanted to leave, but she was afraid because she couldn't do it alone. She would die and no one would even know about it. Suddenly, Yeon-woo interrupted her conversation with herself, saying that he forgot to say something. The teenager turned to the girl and said that he didn't think this guy would touch her again. She was shocked and could not believe her luck. Yeon-woo continued that Min-sik was selling the cells for a lot of money, and their boss was very angry. It looks like this bastard got what he deserved and was beaten up pretty good. The guard asked the boss what to do with Min-sik, but the guy resisted and shouted that he was being unfairly punished. Then the boss exploded, grabbed the rascal, and yelled at him for trusting him with the hideout. And this Min-sik was just selling his boss's stuff. Yeon-woo was surprised that he hadn't told the girl about this earlier. He started talking about the kernels they gave them, but then he stopped and changed the subject. Yeon-woo didn't want to continue the conversation, but he looked at the girl as he was about to leave. Her frightened expression made the teenager say that they were not close friends, but if she needed help, he was waiting for her upstairs. The girl immediately jumped up and ran after Yeon-woo to tell him more about what had happened to Min-sik. Meanwhile, a group of teenagers, Yeon-woo's father and Choi, were talking about the blogger and Lee Taeyeon. So-young said she didn't think their meeting with Yeon-woo would go well and without loss. He would definitely want revenge, and his desire was understandable. She looked Father Yeon-woo in the eye and said that everyone already knew how dangerous he was. Sung-yeon interrupted the conversation, started shouting and demanding that they hurry up and not talk about Yeon-woo because she wanted to go home. Suddenly, Park Min also spoke up, saying that he was in favor of Sung-yeon and suggested that they part ways and that everyone go their separate ways. He went on to say that he wanted to find that guy, and then added that he owed Lee Yong-woo a debt of gratitude. Sung-yeon didn't understand what Park Min was talking about, so she asked him again. Kang Ji-hoon stood aside and remained silent, but he felt that his classmate was blatantly deceiving them. Isuri also said that they were supposed to go to the Kan River, but it was dangerous. And then she asked if they could do anything at all without the military. Soyon suggested waiting for the next broadcast of the guy and going there. And then she returned to Isura and told them not to worry, because if she wanted to leave, they would not keep her. Soyeon added that Isuri probably wouldn't want to leave just like then. Sung-yeon interrupted the conversation and started screaming and whining again about how there was too much talk about Yeon-woo, and she wanted to go home. Then the teenager's father intervened and said that they had to think about their next steps first. He added that they had no time to argue. First, they had to get to the warehouse and then think further. Park Min approached Seo-young, put his hand on her shoulder, and asked her what it was. After that, he looked the girl in the eye and reminded her that he was her assistant because he had promised her, and Soyeon had asked him for a favor. He asked if the girl trusted him and asked her to promise that she would not betray him. But Seo-young just waved Park Min away and asked if he wanted to take his hand away. Isuri watched how So-young behaved with the classmate she held onto so tightly. Kang Min was with her and she told him that it was all strange. But the teenager did not understand what Isuri was getting at. Then she said that she was talking about So-young's actions and the reason why she wanted to find Yeonwoo. Kang Min said they were friends and that was the reason. After all, friends are always ready to help. But Isuri didn't understand because Park Min was infected. Kang Min seemed unaware of this and asked again. Isuri went on to say that no matter how much she thought, she could not understand. Soyeon was friends with Park Min, who was suspected of being infected, and they both searched for Yeonwoo. Kang Min yelled at Isuri for thinking too much. After all, So-young was not infected. The girl interrupted her classmate, telling him to explain something to her. Was there a reason that Seo-young was so obsessed with Yeonwoo that they were secretly meeting? Kang Min was stunned by this information and did not know what to say. Isuri did not wait for his answer and simply told him to leave because they had to find Yeonwoo quickly. Choi said they had finally found the site, but his joy abruptly turned to disappointment. After all, it turned out that it was completely empty. Nothing was left. Choi said that he thought there would be at least something left, but everything was smashed. Then, Yeonwoo's father suggested that they look for something else. Park Choa stood behind everyone else. Suddenly, someone called out to her and the girl turned to the sound. It turned out to be Kang Ji-hoon. He approached the girl and thanked her. After that, he looked her in the eye and promised to repay her in kind. Park Choa looked him in the eye in response, and Kang Ji-hoon tried to say something else. But the girl moved away from him, turned away and told him not to go crazy and that she had to do it. And then she said she would kill Kang Ji-hoon if he continued. Then she asked what the teenager planned to do afterward, whether he would also go looking for Yeonwa, or maybe he wanted to stay. Kang Ji-hoon said he was sure they would find Yeonwoo, and then added that he thought he would move separately. After all, as Park Cho said, he was infected. Then the girl asked him to go with her. Kang Ji-hoon turned and looked at her and asked her again. Park Choa also turned and looked the teenager in the eye and asked him again if she could also go with him. Kang Ji-hoon was speechless at the surprise and tried to ask her why she wanted to do this. Park Choa turned away and began to explain. She said she was just a little ashamed because she had saved Kang Ji-hoon, and if he died, all her efforts would be in vain. And then she said there was something else. The girl lowered her head and paused for a moment. After that, she said that her heart was hurting very badly. Kang Ji-hoon didn't understand what was happening, but he really wanted to hear what had happened. But their conversation was interrupted by Seon-young, who shouted that nothing had happened. It seemed that she did not know how to speak quietly. She was indignant that she did not like anything that was happening. Park Choa continued to say that the teenagers did not pay attention to Seon-young's screams. The girl turned around and said that if Kang Ji-hoon was against it, then it was a bad idea. There was a pause. Everyone was silent and did not dare to speak. Kang Ji-hoon did not look at Park Choa and told her to take better care of herself. He told her to go with the others. And then he added that he was sincerely grateful for everything, but he would pretend that he hadn't heard anything. Meanwhile, Choi and Yeonwoo's father discussed the fact that there was nothing there, and his son was not there either. Choi said that in this situation they should have gone further to the center. His father supported this idea. And then he said that he was not looking for Yeonwoo because he was his son. There was another reason. The father began to tell him that he had never been spoiled and was more like his mother, quiet and smart. Choi supported the man, telling him not to beat himself up and that he was sorry that it happened to his wife. The man looked up and said that everything was fine. It just hurt so much that their son, who was very important to his mother, was lost. Choi told his father not to worry so much because they would overcome everything. And then I asked if the man thought the clouds were strange, and my father supported this idea. He said it seemed to be starting to rain. It hadn't been for a long time. It was starting to rain. Meanwhile, in the room with the monsters, the guards were beating someone badly. She was 2 against 1 guy. It seemed that they overdid it and the victim lost consciousness. They shouted and asked who told him to sell the cells. At that moment, Yeon-u and the girl came in and froze in shock. Then, one man told the guard to stop and addressed the teenagers as school children and ordered them to wait outside the door. But the girl saw something and could not look away from it. She saw her abuser on the floor. It was Min-sik. His face was bloody and he looked miserable. The girl immediately began to mock the guy, telling him to look at himself, what had happened to him. Min-sik raised his face and looked at his friend, who said that his face looked terrible. Then she took out her phone and started filming the guy. Meanwhile, the guard was leading Han Song-yu by the neck somewhere. The boy made excuses, saying that the man had simply misunderstood, but he did not want to listen to the teenager. Han Song-yu asked to be given a chance to explain everything. Suddenly, he saw Lee Yeon-woo and shouted his classmate's name. Han Song-yu literally attacked the teenager. He was screaming and asking for help. Behind them, the guards were dealing with another guy. Han Song-yu asked Yeon-woo to explain everything to them and prove that he really didn't know anything about it. Yeon-woo remained silent and his classmate continued to beg for help, reminding him that he had also helped him. Then, the teenager told Han Song-yu that he was happy to help, but he wanted to be sure that in return he would obey Yeon-woo. Han Song-yu swore that he would do everything he asked. The main man stood next to him and turned to Yeon-woo. He said that it was up to him to decide whether to save his friend or not. They were standing near a pile of monsters. There were so many of them that they seemed to be flesh and blood. The chief said that he knew about it, that they could not be cured now, but he was stupid enough to sell the cells. Yeon-woo added that he also mocked people, and now you wouldn't even understand. The chief agreed, because the nuclei were dividing rapidly. And then he added that the value of these cells would increase every day, perhaps even more than an antidote. Yeon-woo asked when the boss would show him around, because the teenager had brought everything he had been asked for. He wanted to know how to cure the infected person. The boss then asked why Yeon-woo was in such a hurry. He got up and said that he needed more items, and then, after a short pause, he added that she was many. He walked up to Yeon-woo, put his arm around him and promised to show and tell him everything when the teenager found the others. Yeon-woo looked the man straight in the eye, and the chief said he could believe him. According to him, he has never cheated. The men in black and the guards nearby were discussing the fact that they had to go on with their business. Suddenly, someone called Yeonwoo. It was a girl, and she asked what they were talking about with the chief. Yeonwoo wanted to ask when she managed to get here, but the girl interrupted, saying that she would give him one piece of advice. After that, she looked up and said not to trust this chief. She added that all the bastards were more cunning than Yeonwoo thought. But the teenager said that there was a bowling alley on the second floor and asked if she would go. The girl was angry that she was not listened to again. Meanwhile, Han Seong-yu ran to his classmate while the teenagers were arguing with each other. He called out to Lee Yong-woo, glad to see that he was still here. The teenager turned around and saw his crazy classmate. Then he turned around and said he was going bowling. Han Seong-yu was standing behind him, waving and saying that he had found a gift for his friend. He picked up the expensive power bank and asked if he needed it. Yeon-woo turned and looked at Han Seong-yu out of the corner of his eye. The teenager was very happy, saying that he knew the teenager's phone was dead. Meanwhile, Min-sik and his partner were on the floor, and he asked the guards to listen to him. He said he was very sorry and thanked them for not killing him. The guard called him his brother, saying that he had also saved him then and advised him not to get caught by the boss. And then he added that Min-sik was no longer a member of the club, so he had to go his own way. The man was outraged that he couldn't string two words together. He wanted to ask who had betrayed him. Suddenly, Lee Yong-woo's face flashed through his mind. It seemed like Min-sik had a puzzle in his head. He began to curse and threaten Yeonwoo. Meanwhile, the teenager was charging his phone from the power bank Han Seong-yu had given him. People laughed at Yeonwoo for living with a dead phone all the time. The girl asked how he wasn't scared. The teenager said he was used to it. Then she told Yeonwoo to charge some and share it with her, because she didn't have much left. Yeonwoo asked whether it was Han Seong-yu or those thugs, and the girl said it didn't matter. The teenager picked up his phone and turned it on. It lit up, so it was working. The first thing Yeonwoo noticed was that he had a lot of messages on the messenger. And the first one was Park Seo-young. She asked me to call her if Yeonwoo saw this message. She was the one who sent the most. Yeonwoo was shocked, stood in a stupor, and could not believe what he was seeing. His new friend yelled at him to give her the power bank because he had charged his phone. But I stopped when I saw a message from Park Seo-young. He laughed, saying the name of a classmate and asking if she was his friend. Yeonwoo was outraged that she had gone through his phone. The girl joked, saying that she was just curious because they were still small children, and advised Yeonwoo to talk to her older sister. Han Seong-yu intervened, saying that Seo-young was no ordinary girl and was prettier than Noon. The girl was outraged, but Yeonwoo confirmed Han Seong-yu's words. Noona started shouting that Seo-young's avatar wasn't even pretty in the photo. And Han Seong-yu said that it wouldn't be hard for the bandits to take his phone. And then he asked if Yeonwoo needed anything else. Han Seong-yu smiled, saying that if he didn't have a charge, he would help with it. He was very obsessive, and this aroused suspicion. A classmate called them friends, asking him to let him know if Yeonwoo needed anything. But the teenager dismissed him with a couple of phrases. Yeonwoo thought that Han Seong-yu was a very weak guy, but he was not a bad person. Suddenly, Yeonwoo stalled again, rereading the message from So-young. Then he exhaled loudly and put his head in his hands. Noona asked what happened to him. Yeonwoo thought that they were here and were trying to find him now. Soyon was all about him, and the teenager thought to ignore her. And then he decided to just calm down and pretend he didn't have a phone. Soyon was not supposed to call him right now. Meanwhile, the girl was sitting in another room on the stairs all alone. She was looking at her phone as usual, when she suddenly noticed that Yeonwoo had finally read her message.